Hello, welcome to the series called Life Talks, which is a series of interviews with holistic practitioners. I'm your host, Enzo Mecca.
And I'm your co-host, Isabel Sayed.
And today we're in Beaconsfield to interview Doreen Mary Bray. Welcome, Doreen.
Hello, everyone. Thank you.
And thank you for having us in your lovely home and space.
Thank you, Enzo. Thank you, Isabel.
So I understand you're an energy healer and teacher. How long have you been practicing in this field, and have you done any studies, any in modalities, or these skills that you've had most of your life?
That's a really long, deep question. I was born seeing energy, colors, and I had memory. So I remember the day I was born, where my parents worked, where my mother was, but everything that was going on in the hospital, I could see my dad, even though he was in a different room. I still remember the doctor, how he looked, the nurses. My whole life I've seen energy around people, within people. When I look at them, if they ask me to, I can choose to look into their future lives, their past lives, their multidimensional lives. I've been called a medical intuitive because I can sense, I guess kind of like one of those dogs that smell mushrooms under the ground. I can sense different things that are going on in people's biology. It has smell, taste, sensation, feeling. It's a whole package that then, because of my years of experience, I can interpret. I do have training. My training began when I was a year and a half and in the crib, and invisible beings came and took me. It's the best way I can word it. It was like the sky, that would be the wrong word, the ceiling would part, and then I would just see beings and the sky, and I would lift. And many times I would look down and I wasn't in my bed, so years later I realized that I was bilocating. My entire body and soul was leaving, and I always ended up in a classroom, and there was other kids in the classroom.
Wow. But
they had their teachers and I had mine, and when I wanted to look to see who those other kids were, they would go, no. And my books were alive. It's the best way I can word it is like you like watching a movie, but you're kind of enveloped by that movie, and every single night until I was about 15, 16, this took place.
So from 1.5, you said?
Yes, when I was still in the crib, 4 beings came to me. They were wearing cloaks, and I still remember to this day looking at their faces, because at that age, you know what humans look like, and you know their mouths move and they have eyes, and I remember looking at them and like looking like this, and because I couldn't see their faces, I was looking, they were talking, and I was looking for their mouths, but I could hear them, and so I'm going like, where's their mouth? But all I could see was stars. They were just this
interesting,
just energy and stars.
So you were seeing this through the eyes of a child. Was your consciousness that of your exact physical age, or as
right,
your
exactly
higher
what I was
consciousness?
wondering. Yeah. What was your consciousness like as a toddler or something, a child that young, being in this classroom and learning?
My consciousness was expanded, but my physical body was limited, and I knew the limitations. So what I would do is I would sit for hours, say in front of a wall, to try to put my hand through the wall, because I knew I could. And what I would do is go, no, it's not that part of the brain, and then I'd check, and I'd focus on this part. Okay, no, it's not that part. And until I could finally find, because I knew somewhere in here was the doorway, I just had to figure out where it was. And I still remember the first time I put my hand through the wall, I went, oh, okay, and then I actually moved through it. And then I went on to the next experiment, because from the time I was very young, I realized I was here to learn how to be in a physical body.
Wow.
So can you expand a bit more on that? What does that mean, that you felt that you were here to learn what it's like to be in a physical body? Because is there such a huge, what does that entail, being a spiritual being and learning to be in a physical body?
I believe most people feel that they're physical and they're trying to become spiritual.
Right.
But for me, I'm first spirit, and I'm trying to learn how to navigate this 3D reality. And this is where I mess up most, because I find it's difficult. It is difficult. Everything is kind of hard, and even though I can see the molecules moving in that table, as an energetic being, as a soul being, the table and I are one, and I can walk through it. But as a physical being, there's limitations, and unless I can figure out where the dials and gauges and steering wheels and brakes and gas pedal is, then I won't figure out how I can move through that table, but I know I can.
So this is really hard to wrap my head around. Wait a minute. Do you need to? I mean, so you're saying that for you, part of, I mean, I believe that we probably have many missions and purposes and reasons for being here and things that we need to learn, but it sounds like this is a really big one for you, that for you, you've downloaded it and it's deeply part of who you are right here and right now, the spiritual knowledge and being, just the beingness, but that, and that you're learning how to sort of marry the two, or how can you be a spiritual being in a physical body, or you said something about
I'm a teacher. You know, those that have learned a lot end up being a teacher. So for me, learning how to navigate this reality in a graceful and peaceful way, in a way that is wholesome, that's of service and gratitude, and teaching others how to do that would be the greatest gift. So the more I can understand how the physical body works with the spirit and how they work as one and how to navigate them as one, then the more I can teach it.
It almost sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, I could be totally off, like the physical realm and the physical limits pose maybe some obstacles to, you were saying earlier that you believe that many of us, or most of us, are physical beings trying to connect to the spiritual world or become more spiritual. So do you think that being so connected to our physical world is somehow inhibiting our ability to, or I don't know, dulling our ability to be more spiritual?
Totally. The physical body has been created to navigate with the soul as one. As you know, if the soul is not intact, if you're unconscious in the hospital bed, say for example, your soul's off wandering, you're unconscious. We need the soul to be fully present. It doesn't have to be fully aligned, but it does need to be present for consciousness, for us to be the observer and participant in this world. So the more that a person can know what buttons and dials to push, so I'm not really wording it the right way, let me say it a different way. And your cellular structure has been created in a way that can expand and vibrate at higher frequencies, but people have been programmed to be restricted and smaller, and they compress instead of expand.
Where does that program come from? That's compressing as
Since the person's born.
Okay, so you mean, values, experiences, family beliefs, and all of that.
Yes.
Combined.
Yes.
But the whole essence of living in this 3D physical world is to be physical and to have physical experiences. Of course, everybody wants to go to the other side or understand the other side more. I think that's sort of the goal, but I think the experiences are here, though.
Yes, but as one. So many people, the best way I can word it is that they walk with their soul beside them, but not in them.
Okay.
As a seer, as somebody that can see an energy field and where the soul is, it's a good 85, maybe 90% of the population are not aligned with all that they are. So that means they're limited.
And what does that look like when someone is aligned with their soul? What would it look and feel like?
Beauty, peace, you'd be magnetically drawn to that person. You know they have something you want. It's something that your heart desires. It's something that I think each of us crave, to have that unification, because with it comes absolute peace.
And I imagine that many of us have probably had glimpses of that in our own lifetime.
Yes, it's called grace.
Right. But but what we don't have is this continuous
Exactly.
maintenance of that.
Right.
And that's the journey, that's part of being physical. I want to take the conversation to another area. So you've taught, as a teacher, you've taught a lot of well-known people in our community. I presume through just your natural skills. Can you tell us a bit about what you did study?
Certainly. Chinese medicine. I was studying acupuncture, but I didn't like the needles. They were too unnatural for me, so I studied acupressure instead. I didn't really switch over, it's part of it. I studied, of course, anatomy, physiology, psychology, philosophy. I studied sacrocranial work, massage therapy, reflexology, spinal alignment therapies, Reiki a bit. It wasn't my forte. I've studied a lot.
Okay, so two of my favorite are reflexology and cranial sacral. Which kind of cranial sacral are we talking about? The up-ledger technique? The osteopath technique?
Yes.
Excellent. Wow, that's an amazing toolkit.
In addition to what you've grown up with, or what was already, the knowledge that was already there, you're
Yes.
saying.
And that was my purpose, because as I mentioned, I think we were doing that Facebook text thing, I started my path when I was 4. I was reading cards, and for me it was natural. My mom just gave me a regular deck and said, "Doreen, read me my future." So I said, okay. And for me it was natural. I would lay out the cards, I'd look at the person and lay them out according to the person's energy field, and once they were laid out, I'd stare at them and they would turn into a movie. I didn't see cards anymore. I would just see people walking, talking, wearing whatever they're wearing, and I would just describe what I was seeing. To me, they were just playing with me, like, you know, you turn on a TV, you sit with a kid and you're talking about the film you're seeing. So to me, I thought everyone could do it. It came natural.
Okay, in a conversation you mentioned you made some kind of reference to that as a child you knew you were psychic, but you didn't want to continue life to be known as a psychic, that you wanted to do something else. Can you tell us why you thought that way, and what you did to make a difference, if I could say?
Probably one of the scariest things happened to me that will ever happen to anyone. I was doing a reading, and prior to that I would read cards and people would come and say, "Wow, it's amazing, you were dead on," and you don't really feel it. You just say thank you and that's cool, and you keep going with your life, you know. But one day I was doing a reading for a guy. He just called me up. So, you know, you don't know people, you just go to their home and you do the reading. And I laid out the cards, and I first asked, what do you want to know? And he said, well, I'm having a business meeting. I want to know if the person's okay and if everything's cool. And so I laid out the cards, and I said, yeah, the person's fine, but don't forget, I'm seeing. I'm not just looking at cards. So I stopped for a second and went, oh, is this a drug deal? I knew in that moment it was. And he went, because what I saw in my image was a man, and he had a briefcase full of money, and standing at the door, and yeah, it wasn't a cop. I guess that's really what he wanted to know. But I got scared, so I looked over at the time, and at those days they had the flip clock, flip, you know, the next number came up. So I looked at the time, and he asked me what time the guy was going to arrive, and I said 3:13. I looked at the time, and the clock went flip. 3:13, knock, knock, knock. I grabbed all my stuff. I want to get out of there. I don't want to be in the middle of a drug deal. Open up the door, and the person I saw was now standing in front of me.
Good
So I
Lord.
was caught in my own vision.
Right.
And that's
And
a
you-
really scary place to be, because now now I had all these questions. You know, am I using this, or is it using me? Am I the one in power, or is power controlling me?
Wow.
And I didn't know. So I decided, until I could figure it all out, I would just stop doing that for a while and learn how to use my abilities in other ways. So that's when I started to study Chinese medicine for the first time.
Interesting.
We're creating and we're co-creating, and there's no such thing as time, and so, but what power do we really have, and what is destiny versus creative power? You know, like, how much are we really creating versus what is?
I believe we're all walking prophecy. Our prophecy is preordained by ourselves before birth. We deviate from that path, but we'll always be drawn back to it over and over again. It'll always call to us, and the calling could keep a person awake day and night, or work 2 jobs to try to be of service in that, to address that calling. But it will keep pulling you back, because there is a path that you came to walk, and that's what I mean by preordained and destiny. You decided that before your birth, and so you're keeping you on path.
And so, which kind of brings us also to this question of karma, and not just karma, but, you know, yeah, in part, but and past and lives, and what, you know, what we choose. So why do you think that, how do we choose what we want to experience next, and why would we make certain choices?
I remember all my past lives. When I was just a child, and when I was born, I was connected to all my past lives. So they were part of my memory.
How many? The question comes to mind.
A lot, and not just in human form.
Wow.
I remember being a bird so clearly, like it was yesterday. It's the pecking. I was a seabird, and I remember running along the beach and pecking. I love to peck. It was such a desire. It was so strong. So there's certain things about different lives that stay with you, because the desire and that fulfillment of that desire is so great. So I do remember my past lives, but more importantly, what I wanted to bring up was that I remember my lives in between being physical. And so I remember before coming into birth, I remember what we could call heaven, what that state is, and I remember what it looks like and how I navigated those realms. And I remember before coming, that the best way I can word it is, well, you know, on the Matrix, they show everything is in these lines, grids,
right,
patterns. Okay, so if you think of all those lines coming towards you and you slice them, they'd actually be holes, highways, energy highways, and every person before birth, they have their own wall of intent. I'll call it that, which means that the frequency of the soul creates the different possible outcomes. And so for myself, I looked down each one of those tubes. I was drawn to certain ones, and I could see if I chose those parents in that country, that I would have the potential to become whatever it was. And I know that I had a particular desire, a burning in my heart, a soul, and the life I chose was definitely not an easy life, but I knew that I would have a greater capacity to teach in the way that I felt I needed to.
So I have a question about where you are in between lives. What does that look like, and how long a period is it?
It's different for everyone.
Okay.
It's different depending on what you did in that life. Did you create horror, pain, and suffering? Then you might stay in a state of hell, you could call it that, where you will relive all of what the torture that you did, and until you beg for forgiveness and ask for mercy and swear you'll never do it again. So it's a processing. If you had a fairly peaceful life, then you'll process quite quickly in 10 days. If you really desire, you could be reborn. Some, it's thousands of years between births. So it's very individualized. When you leave your body, the state that you enter is very peaceful and joyful. And when we're in a body, there can be a lot of stress and fear and worry and concern. So when you're in that other state, some people it's just like, oh wow, and they want to stay in that state for a while.
Right.
But eventually, you can sense the planet, what's going on. You can peek in. You can be called in when people pray. Certain people in, or pray for help. If you're so inclined, when you're on the other side, you can be a helper. You can come in, and eventually you'll be drawn back in. Earth and being human has a flavor, a smell, a taste, it's a sensation. It pulls you to itself, it calls to you, and then you get that warrior feeling that grows in you. Go, I can do it this time. I'm gonna go. I'm ready.
So is it the way Abraham describes it as it's the cutting edge, it's the leading edge where all souls want to be if they incarnate physically? Is that sort of what you're saying?
You only come if you truly, truly, truly
So it is
desire.
a warrior mentality.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to do this.
But you also can choose what form you want to come in. It's not automatic that you're human. If you come in as a dog, you chose to come in as a dog. Maybe you want to be a tree, or maybe you really, 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 really want to be a flower.
Wow. Okay, a deeper question. Knowing everything that you know about yourself and existence, physical and beyond, what is your soul mission? What do you think is your soul mission? Is it growing, expanding, or do you already know right from the word go?
I believe every breath I'm on mission. Every step I'm on mission. That I don't have a destiny or an end point or a goal, that it's just to be of service in any way that I can and to help where I can.
And yet there are so many different ways one can help, and I'm not surprised that in that case that you've studied so many different modalities. So how did you feel or decide that this is how you want to help or be of service?
I'm still a bit confused about it.
Aren't we all? I'm relieved to hear you say that.
I have a great desire to only talk about spirit and my knowledge is in that way. But for some it doesn't serve them, so I'm not of service. And that's when the different modalities come into play, because maybe that's what they need right now, and perhaps in time, once they become greater in whatever that way is, then they're ready to add on to themselves. And so I see that the smallest or the largest, it's all the same. It's all good. It's all part of the whole.
Speaking of the whole, and what I wanted to ask you about was not just intuition, but we often hear or talk about the higher self. And I want to know. I want to settle the score. no, settle the score. That doesn't even make sense. But anyway, what I'd like to discuss is who is the higher self, and
Or what is?
or who and what is the higher self, and how do we tap into this higher self or align ourselves with this higher self in this kind of charged physical existence.
Not all of you is born into form. The soul is far greater than what we can put in a box and measure and weigh. And so the best way I can word it is that we'll call it your higher self, seeds itself. I see it like a dandelion when it has a seed head, and so the soul goes and all of its essence blows throughout the universe. But because time and space doesn't exist, then those seedlings enter all different time periods. So in reality, there's no past or future lives when we look at it like that. And it's seeding itself. Well, some seeds will fall on rocks and not fertile ground, so they won't do as well. And some seeds will fall into the most fertile grounds and really become something extraordinary. But all of the seedlings are representative of the higher self. And they're all interconnected.
So, and these seedlings, so they're representative of the higher self in what way? Are you saying that how much of it does kind of take up and spread, or can you explain a little more?
I know humans, it's natural. We want to put things again, we want to measure it and want it exact, and yet we're talking about a realm in existence that doesn't have form or time or space, so we can't measure it in that way. So I'll try to word it. You are your higher self at any given moment, or you're not. In other words, you can have the perspective of where you are expanded up to 65 feet around you, which means that you've incorporated most of what you are. And some call that the Merkaba. It's when your cellular structure and your soul structure merge as one. But every one of your seedlings, do you ever notice that sometimes you might meet someone and you go, oh my God, I think they're like me, like they're so similar, well, it could be a seedling, it's possible. We call them different things, soulmates, twin flames, we got a million names for them, but basically they're seedlings. And all the seedlings are there expressing the highest potential that each one can, depending on, again, where they're born, their parents, and everything they've been exposed to. And all this information goes back to the higher self. But in any given moment, you can be the higher self, or you can be the smaller self, or you can be the other selves.
We talked about how we choose to come into what kind of life to have, or what body to be born into, in which part of the world, and all of that. But at the same time, it sounds like what I'm hearing you say is that we're also, because of this concept of the higher self, which is spread out in different places and existence, that we're kind of simultaneously, even though we may choose one. I guess I'm just having a hard time distinguishing who am I, who is observing who, and where is the learning and the integration happening at what level?
At every level.
So in other words, I'm on some levels integrating what my other self or other seedling is.
You got it. Yes.
And it's expansive, so...
Yes.
It sounds a lot too like the way that you're describing this to me. It sounds a lot like the concept of God, that we are all the face of, or an image of God.
There you go.
And that's what the higher self sounds like. It sounds like the whole
collective.
The unity, basically, where it all connects. All that is.
You could call it that.
So how do we connect or tap into the love, wisdom, or whatever the higher self has to offer?
What I've seen this short journey through life is a lot of people who want to connect, that take the classes and the courses or whatever it is so that they can teach it or become the therapist, but they're so disconnected. And there's no soul essence in them. And I find this a bit disturbing because we've created some kind of idea that if you take the right courses and do the right studies that you will become. But becoming is a journey, and that journey is multifold. One is the body needs particular nutrients to be full of energy, but also so that the cells aren't contaminated, slow, sluggish, heavy, dense. So what we put in our mouths is extremely important. What we drink, again, we're 80% water if it's a healthy body, and what fluids are we putting in, and what are we replenishing it with. The entire body is a system that's always changing, and so everything we do each and every day adds on to that change in a good way or a bad way. And so the body is the antenna. And so if I have a sick body, how do I expect to be able to communicate with spirit and be one and teach oneness if I'm not one with myself? And so there's many sides to it. It's not just one side where I'm going to sit and meditate and open up my chakras and now I'm going to be light. But I can put all kinds of junk inside me and think terrible thoughts about people, and that's all okay. That's why I say it's a journey. It's a cultivation of self. In order for the system, which the body, every cell is an antenna. Every single cell has purpose, and it's vital to your journey. So every cell needs to be honored and heard, listened to, cherished, nourished, loved. So without the teachers, without, and I want to clarify that, without the people who are actually walking the path, who's showing the way? So we just become like each other. We mimic each other, just like the children mimic the parents. It's just a perpetuation of those same energies.
So speaking of what we are shaping and forming, kind of like clay or Play-Doh, a lot of therapies claim that they can sort of unprogram or maybe neutralize certain parts of our karma, and that we don't need that our suffering and our trajectory doesn't need to be as it is, and that we can sort of neutralize or bypass or heal. Or so what do you think about that?
You know why I'm laughing? Yeah. Because you reminded me of this guy that advertised, and I remember breaking out laughing when I read it. He said, for $10,000 I'll clear all your karma.
Wow. That's all?
That's all. You'll be free the rest of your life. Imagine that. And we are in an age where people dearly want freedom, consciousness. They want to feel better about themselves. They want to be less stressed. And so they're buying into these things, and it's unfortunate, but it is a new age business.
Right.
There's buyer beware.
There's
this term. Actually, there's a term for it. I just read it. I just read it. It's an old book. It's nothing new, of course. But spiritual materialism, and how we apply our materialism to the world of spirituality, and how we, for example, create spiritual goals and feel hurried or pressed or feel that we have to attain something or get somewhere, and that we're seeking, and that's a form, and so these are some examples of spiritual materialism.
Yes.
And how actually, again, it was a Deepak Chopra book, and he was saying how, no, it's the opposite. Do not seek, because it's all happening right here. Every experience, and it could just take, it's a fleeting moment, can expand your awareness, your consciousness, and we're not going anywhere. And sort of like how you were saying before about how, when I asked about how do we tap into our higher self, and you were saying that it's a journey in itself, and you said you don't feel that you're going anywhere. You're being of service in every moment, in every breath.
Yes.
Which I love, and I feel takes off so much pressure to get somewhere.
Right, because the moment you try to get somewhere, when we're talking about spiritual path, then you're on the wrong path. Because being on a spiritual path means you sit where you are and become. There's no going anywhere to do it. You don't need any tools. Every tool you need is already within you. We've been born fully equipped with everything that's needed.
So how do you propose we shed these layers or these limitations, and here and now with all of our, you know, addictions, limitations, limiting thoughts and whatever, how do we start to raise our vibrations? I know you had talked about a bit about nutrition before, or what we put in, how we fuel our bodies. What else would you?
Then how we fuel our thoughts. You know, any thoughts that we allow to repeat. It's usually if I have a thought, I go, okay, and then that's done. I don't need to think about it 65,000 times.
Right. Which is that? What is that stat about how many times we repeat that?
Yes. Apparently, we have 65,000 thoughts a
attraction.
day, but what is it? Something like 96% are the same thoughts.
Right.
Right.
And so meditation must play into this, a big factor in changing.
Yes. First, you begin by meditating, and I like mindfulness. I also like the types of meditation that are storytelling. So you're just listening to a story, which most people can do, and what the story is doing is telling you. So you're instructing your body what to do, and so your cells and your body is responding. And that's a good meditation for those that can't sit in silence. Mindfulness is where, for example, you're outside, you're sitting on the grass, and you become the earth. You allow your energies to drop into the earth, and you allow the frequencies of the earth to become your frequencies. You allow this energy to pass through you freely, easily, and effortlessly, and wherever you feel it doesn't pass through you, you allow the earth energy to take it away as it moves through you.
So for anyone who would like to either come have a session with you, or potentially even take workshops or study with you, what's the best way to find you and get in touch with you?
Probably email, Doreen Mary Bray at gmail.com. That's my personal email.
Great.
I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn. I do have a few websites. One is the Walking Sage Meditations. I have over 50 meditations available. Also, my level 1 class is available. It's $49, and I believe it's about 24 hours of class. It's intense. So if somebody does want to learn more, then there's a lot available there. I also have a website called Ghost Busting International.
Right.
Oh yes,
we didn't
this
get
is
to
the
talk
latest
about.
one. Yeah.
Yes, and that is so much fun. And the more difficult or weird types of hauntings, the better. I love it.
Really? Wow, that's too
But I mean,
much.
we go in and just do regular clearings also.
So Doreen Mary Bray, wow, this has been just a delightful encounter. I've never met you before, and wow, you're just a world of knowledge. I've never experienced anyone like you.
Thank you.
I concur.
Thank you very
So
much.
thanks for being our guest in your lovely home, having us as well.
My pleasure, anytime.
So there you have it, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was too much.